Hello, good morning. My name is Ryan McLeod. If you don't know me by that, you might know me more as the Blackbox guy. Blackbox is an iOS game that I created that's played by over 13 million people. It's a game that regularly sends people hiking up mountains, draining their phone batteries, calling their friends, singing like whales. It's one of very few games that's won an Apple Design Award, not once, but twice. And it continues to delight and frustrate people to this day. Not just on iPhone and iPad, but now on Vision Pro as well. How many of you have played Blackbox before? Cool. How about on Vision? Nice. For everyone else, before I dive into things, I want to explain Blackbox on iOS. So it's this collection, a growing collection, of 81 puzzles that you solve by not touching the screen most of the time. And it's all centered around this grid of what I call lights. These lights are these little squircle squares, and they fill in and turn on when you complete a challenge. And each one of these lights can be tapped to open a challenge. And warning, this talk contains spoilers, I'm sorry. It's a very different kind of game, so a puzzle like this you might fool around with for a long time before you realize there's something about holding the device flat or putting it on a table and spinning it that completes the challenge. This guy didn't figure it out. If that one didn't seem crazy to you, I want to share one of my favorites. I'm going to pause the video here. You can think a little bit about what these 42 green balls might represent. If you were to come back to this challenge later, you might notice the balls were yellow, or that there's fewer of them. Or maybe they're red now. Now they're floating at the top of the screen. And then later in the day, they're on the bottom of the screen again. What you might eventually figure out is that there's never more than 100 of them, and these balls represent your battery percentage. And one of the challenges is completed by charging your phone. Uncharge it, or unplug it, and the balls will fall down and slowly pop and deplete. But Blackbox is not just an app of tricks and gimmicks, nor is it a collection of APIs and sensors that get people to do crazy things. And while it's been really fun to send millions of people on crazy quests that they might not have otherwise, or send people on hikes, or inventing contraptions, or getting tattoos, which I promise is not a solution to a puzzle. It's been a blast, and I think Blackbox is so unique because it does all of this and also produces these like astonishing aha moments where you figure stuff out that are really deeply satisfying. So at its core, Blackbox is about nourishing and strengthening creative problem solving. It's about getting you to be more in touch with the world through your device, becoming more aware of the phase of the moon. And it's all about leveraging parts of the iPhone and the world that we don't think about so much. What I wanted to create was this place of wonder and these aha sort of moments. The iPhone just happened to be the material that I was working in 2014, which means I've been working on Blackbox for over 10 years now, which is really crazy. And that means that Blackbox officially launched in 2016. Went on to win an Apple Design Award in 2017. And since launch, I've added dozens of new challenges, a ton of accessibility support, languages, sonic interfaces, haptics, continue to refine the very frustrating and fun experience. But then in 2023, this happened. And I always knew when Apple announced whatever AR platform that they would, that would be the moment I might start with AR. But I never really thought it made any sense for Blackbox. And besides that, I had zero AR, VR, spatial experience. That plus 10 years of working on the iPhone made this jump really uncomfortable. But I took it anyway. And last February, when the Vision Pro launched, Blackbox was there alongside with it. So I'm going to show you a little sample of what that looks like. Rather than interacting with a grid of lights, you have these bubbles that float around your space. And they feel like they're there. And you get to see and hear and interact with it all directly rather than through this little screen. Rather than finding hidden meta challenges you might rip open space and find a new meta space. It's all at once really familiar and completely different, which is how Blackbox went on to win the first Apple Design Award for a visionOS game. That said, I don't think I ever would have designed an award-winning experience for Vision if I didn't learn to think in a new way, which is what this talk is going to be about. So it's about that journey, a lot of philosophical design ideas that helped me get there, and what helped me see that Blackbox is really at home on Vision, even more than on iOS. And also all this power that I sort of realized along the way that we have, the responsibility to use this new tool to not just make apps, but invent new ways of seeing and interacting with the world. And I hope this talk can be inspiring to those of you who are new to this platform like I was, as well as those of you who have way more experience, and anyone in any design field, really. So I would be a really bad game developer if I didn't ask to play a game with you first. I'd like everyone to take out their phone. I'd like everyone to take a photo of this slide. In the back, you might need to zoom. If you want me in it, I will pose for you. Get a picture of this slide. If you recognize this puzzle, please don't spoil it. And I want you to take the next minute and see if you can find a way to connect all 9 dots with 4 or fewer lines, straight lines, without picking up your pen. You can do this in your head, or if you want to be more interactive on iOS, you can get the little annotation tool and draw some lines. If that's still confusing, here's an example of a not-winning solution. So 4 straight lines or fewer. Don't lift your pen. This one, the Let's Vision logo, only goes through 7. So I'm going to give you a full minute. I'm just going to be here. So please, don't be intimidated. Hard. It's a difficult one. If it makes you feel better, I didn't figure this out. I'm not actually that good at puzzles. So a lot of you are probably stuck, and that's totally normal. It's because your brain has drawn a box that does not exist. And you've invented rules that I never gave you. Because an invisible box is still a box, and before we think outside of one, we need to realize that we're in one. This is a classic, wonderful example of thinking outside the box. Did anyone get this? Nice. I said 4 lines or fewer, though. Did anyone get it with less? We escaped one box, but perhaps there's another one. Look at the dots again, and try to think of a way to solve it with fewer than 4 lines. Most people would also say this is impossible. I said it was impossible. That's only because they're still making up a rule and assuming a box that doesn't exist. Who said that the lines have to go through the center of every dot? Okay, wow. So we've escaped 2 invisible boxes now. Surely this cannot go any further. Can you solve it with 1 line? And not just a fat line that goes across every dot. You can if you bend your thinking outside the box of the form itself with 1 straight line. This is all because, again, before we think outside the box, we have to realize that we're in one. Just to drive this point home, I'd like to tell a little story from when I was very young. My mom grabbed this jar of oats from the back of the closet, and there was a moth trapped inside. And my sister and I like to release bugs outside, so she took us outside to release it. But when she did, it just continued to fly in the same corkscrew that it was flying inside this jar. And while I'd like to think it eventually broke out of that, it's not hard to think it just continued like that forever. And we don't live in glass jars, but a lot of us have been designing, if you pretend this is an iPhone, exclusively within glass jars for a really long time. And it leads to what I like to call trapped thinking. When you learn to fly in a jar like this, even the freedom of a new platform feels really, really small. So when I was first faced with making Blackbox for visionOS, I was also a bit stumped and trapped. And I was convinced it was possible, or I was not really convinced it was possible, but I thought it was a fun challenge. So I got to work sketching ideas. Some of the obvious ones were putting the lights on a window, you tilt your head, stuff happens on the window, or this kind of infinitely sided, six-sided cube. As you rotate it, new puzzles reveal themselves. Or one where puzzles were just scattered around your room. There was a lot of technical and sticky issues to doing this. None of them really felt right, and it's because I had been trapped in 10 years of kind of thinking through the platform I had been on. So how to escape that? Well, when it comes to technical problems, it really helps to think outside the box and go to first principles and ask yourself, what is a dot? And what are the bounds? And what are the other bounds that I'm still not thinking of? But when it comes to more creative works, I like to think about it differently. Because before you build, you have to dream of something, not in pixels or pages, but in pure ideas. So instead of asking what the box is, I like to ask, what is the castle in the sky version of this? So if I have this fantastic idea of a castle made out of clouds that's floating through the atmosphere, and I want to convey this idea to you, I could try to make it using an AI tool like I did here. But it's not the real idea. This is just an image bound by the medium of LEDs behind me. This concept is called the treachery of images. You might be familiar, by a famous French philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. I'm sorry to the Frenchies in the room. I told you we'd get philosophical, though. In short, this thing you see is not the thing itself, right? It's just an image. And I could represent it in different ways. I could use pen and paper. I could make a film about it. I could even write a book or a novel. Whatever medium I choose, there's ways to optimize for that medium and its strengths. And the more I work with it, the better I will get. But I will also start to assume certain invisible bounds and boxes. If you take someone like me that's been making iOS apps for 10 years, or someone that's been writing books for 10 years, and drop them into the director's seat for a movie, or the seat to code a visionOS app, you're likely to make not the best thing. This is because an idea is not bound by the medium, but it's bound by its creator. And it's not bad to specialize in a material, but many of us have been specializing for years, if not decades, in very literal boxes like this. And personally, I think jumping from one to the other without a lot of consideration is one reason a lot of experiences feel a little disappointing. We can't just go from one to the other. We have to find our castle in the sky first, and where your idea existed first. It existed before the medium, so we need to go there. Strip away pixels, pages, all of that, and find that core idea, the castle in the sky. So, once you've found your castle in the sky, we can get to know materials. I think Apple is a master at using materials. They've always shown extreme sensitivity and sort of understand how things feel in hand, the emotional resonance of stuff. And someone at Apple once taught me how they do that, which is by thinking through each material's inherent strengths, its limitations, respecting what they're good at, and working with the grain of them rather than applying some one-size-fits-all approach. So for example, plastic. Particularly good at soft curves, in part because injection molds require it. They really like these big tapered shapes. And these big corner radiuses feel really friendly and they feel nice in your hand. It's also light, so you can use a lot of it. You can easily imbue it with color. You can even put in texture design elements, which is completely different from metal, which has to be milled, has very strict geometry requirements. It's less likely to feel warm in the hand, but it's very strong and it feels premium, and it's really good at accentuating designs. It's also really tricky to color brightly. Like, if you work against its grain by just painting it to give it a bright color, it'll eventually chip and it'll look terrible. Which is why when companies like Apple color metal, they anodize it, changing it molecularly, but it does result in duller colors. But if you work with plastics, you can get a full rainbow. So there's certain things these materials are great at, and there's certain things they're not. And we're always going to get the best results when we work with their strengths. Big idea here again. Each material has its own grain. When we work with it rather than against it, designs will feel at home. So if we're translating a big idea like Apple does of your first computer, or like a very personal device, you make different material choices. And platforms are just like materials. Whether you are committed to a new material and making an idea work for it, or the other way around, how can you harmonize with that material's grain for the most authentic result? Platforms are just like materials. So what is the platform or the material of iPhone and iOS like? Well, it's very personal, it's pocketable. You experience it behind a lock screen, though, so in these little fleeting moments. And our interactions tend to be quick and focused. It's very small, so we have to think about touch targets. It has limited battery life, so we can't do all the crazy stuff that we want. And the content needs to be digestible. But it's very context and sensor rich. Contrasted with Vision and the Vision Pro, I think Sarah touched on a lot of this, but you're obviously not constrained to a rectangular form anymore. Your app can exist out of your field of view. You can hear things that you can't see. Things can move into your view. It's extremely powerful and dynamic. It can simulate things and have things land on stuff in the room. And you don't just have touch targets anymore. You have an entire hand, or two. That's all to say that every material, medium, and platform has a language, and designing well is all about speaking that fluently. So, now that we've gone over all of that, unconstrained to a rectangle, what does the big castle in the sky idea of Blackbox look like? To me, it's this sort of unexplainable phenomenon. Rather than being a puzzle box with a clear maker, I like to think of it as something a bit agnostic. It's not a Rubik's Cube. It's not an escape room. It's just something that kind of exists, or like it evolved like that. And it's unclear what you're solving for, but when you find the edges of a solution, you kind of know it's right. And you can keep going and confirm that and complete a challenge. And then again, the material. visionOS all around you, not through a slab of glass in your hand. It can reflect the world. It can track things. It's really great at modeling, but it's even better at simulating stuff. Putting these all together, from iOS game to Castle in the Sky to the implementation, what does this look like? I'm going to go through a couple examples. As I began to think about the evolution of Blackbox to visionOS, the first thing I thought about was this iconic grid. Now, this grid was definitely inspired by the iOS app icon grid, but there's other things here, like creating touch targets that work well for the finger, making sure that people don't think about a linearity to the puzzles and aren't comparing level numbers, and people can explore at their own pace. Now, there's this great mechanic. You can tap any puzzle to launch into it, and you can tap anywhere to leave it. And this is very fluid. It also teaches people that touching the screen is not a solution. And I like to think these lights are very precious to me, so they only exist once. There's not a screen that comes over with another copy or representation of the same thing. It fluidly moves into one and back to the other. So on visionOS, how do we do the same thing? We want people to play at their own pace, so maybe just scattering the puzzles around would work well. But when I tried that, things sometimes float a little bit. It's not exactly perfect, but if we float things in the sky, that looks good. But puzzles don't really float, but bubbles float. Turns out this platform makes it really easy to make a convincing bubble, reflecting the real world and wobbling and hovering. These things look so believable in headset that they intuitively beg to be popped. I'm going to show you a little bit of that. So, in Blackbox, we can fill the room with puzzles like this. And these look even better in headset. Come by the booth if you'd like to see. These cast these great shadows on the ground. Again, you can pop them multiple ways with your gaze or fingers, or you can clap them. They bump into each other. They are a part of this space. And we try to think of every way that people might interact with them. And entering a challenge is just as fluid as on iOS. But rather than being through a screen, it completely engulfs you. You can immediately feel what you need to do. And then after solving a puzzle, we could keep things really static, but it begs to be played with, and we have all these tools to simulate. So why not make something a little more interactive? We could have an exit button also. That was the obvious solution. Luckily, we came up with this gesture for creating a new bubble and putting the puzzle back where it was. And you can use that to just make bubbles to play with as well. So one more time, because I think this is fun. You can gaze and pinch a bubble, but the thing everyone wants to do is pop them. And then to put it back, this simple little gesture puts it right back where it belongs. If you've played Blackbox on iOS, you're likely familiar with this challenge. It's a bit infamous. Again, spoiler, I'm sorry. This little map pin drops down the first time you play, and it sort of suggests going somewhere. So if you were going to take a walk down the block, you might see this little ring growing, and you might decide to keep going. And after a kilometer, you might see that first ring hit the light and turn it on. And you might think, I'm going to keep going. These don't increase linearly. How would we do this on Vision? Well, we have GPS. We could basically do the same thing and have a giant pin that falls from the sky. It's kind of upsetting, very sharp. But people don't wear these outside. They don't go on walks with them. So what is Vision really good at? Well, it's very good at understanding the space and where it is in a way that the iPhone's actually not. So we took advantage of that and made this challenge. And when you first open it, it's just kind of a curious cube. You immediately know that it reacts to you. It makes this stretching sound. I don't know if you can hear. It's kind of groaning and turning towards wherever you are. And at some point, you might pull away from it a bit and recognize that it's actually following you. I'm not going to completely spoil this, but you can probably see a bit of where this is going. I don't know why. It makes this terrible sound like a rubber band being stretched too far, but everyone just wants to see what happens. I could go on and on with these examples, but what I want you to see is that by simply charging ahead to bring Blackbox from iOS to Vision, produced the kind of okay-ish ideas that I first had, the ones that didn't feel right, the sketches. And it's because I was trapped in iOS thinking, even if it had a 3D twist. Now, what worked was going backwards and finding that castle in the sky idea of Blackbox. And then I was really able to go forward and think of what the grain of vision was to produce this award-winning app. But this is not a one-time process. This was an ongoing escaping trapped thinking, finding the castle in the sky, working with the material, realizing invisible boxes, repeatedly, and finally escaping to this final form. Now, this is the same thinking and principles that we needed to apply and did to the 9-dot puzzle. When we first try to get there directly, we fail. We instead had to step back out of the box out of that invisible box to find a solution. That was just our first attempt, though. We needed to repeat the process, and that's how we got to our ultimate, most elegant solution. Designing for vision is exactly the same. It isn't just a bigger iPhone. This is an entirely new material. This is a really powerful material. It has the power to unlock really amazing things that we haven't thought of yet, like a world where we can share space across oceans, or simulate life-saving surgeries, or experience the prehistoric. The thing is, these ideas have all been dreamed already. A lot of these things have already been made. They're incredible, but they've already been built. We are here. And we're only going to get there, to the unfathomable things, by breaking out of trapped thinking, returning to those core ideas, and harmonizing with the grain of these materials until the castles in the sky that we have become reality. Thank you.
好，谢谢 Ryan 为我们带来如此精彩的分享，带我们一步步打开脑洞。接下来是 Q&A 环节，哪位观众朋友如果想要提出问题，可以举手，我们的工作人员会把话筒递给大家。如果你想体验 Blackbox， 我们在外面的 C17展位，你可以在那里玩 Vision Pro 里面的 Blackbox 这个应用。那么，如果还没有人提出问题，或者你在想，我可以再给你垫一句话，就是我刚才非常受到启发的是演讲中的一句话 ：It's easy to adopt the new technologies, but it is hard to adopt new ways of thinking。好，有观众愿意提问吗？哦，那里有一位。
Hello? Hi, sorry, that was loud. Hi, my name is Helen, and I am from a Chinese AI community called Way2AGI, and we are the biggest community in China. We have millions of followers, and this is our founder, AJ. Hi. We're very excited about your game, and we're so illuminated from the 9 Dots challenge. None of us could fathom the breaking out of the box, and we really like your presentation. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights. I was wondering, sometimes me as a creator, I would think that my ideas are too unique and too small and narrow, and nobody is going to echo with me, and nobody's going to play my game, and nobody's going to use my stuff. So how do you deal with that kind of doubt for yourself? How do you find your first customer base, or just keep going, or find a really actually workable prototype, or all that stuff? It's a big question, sorry.
It's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. So how do you know, I think what I heard, how do you know that it's going to have appeal?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think, for me, I think about that a little bit with creating things, but I also know when you start to think this way, you see a lot of the gaps that people aren't answering, and people are very hungry for that. There's a lot of copying and doing the same thing. So if you are able to see another solution for something and wrap it up in a nice way, I think it's a pretty good guarantee that people are going to find it interesting.
What's your favorite challenge that you've designed in Blackbox?
Ooh, on iOS or Vision?
Oh, whatever you can show.
There's one on Vision that I like. It looks like a dotted line. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, though. And I also really love the battery challenge, just because it's really fun hearing from people be like, when I'm at work, they're always yellow, and when I'm at home, it's green, and they're putting all these other ideas into it. Any challenge that does that, really.
Have you used any AI tools in your creations?
Yeah. I mean, in this talk, I used a couple, actually, for some images. Some things were human. Some things were not. And I use it a lot for sort of working with, for coding, mostly.
For coding.
Yeah.
Is there any else or like visuals, audios, or idea generating even for AI, using AI to use your game?
I use it a lot for like working with word stuff and copy for things, marketing, ideas like that. I haven't used it for actually coming up with puzzle ideas. That's not a bad idea. I should go try that. I wonder how it would fare. And I have a lot of interest in using it for other apps. I think in ways that people don't realize it's AI. I think there's a lot of things that are really going straight at that, but there's a lot of more interesting ways to take it and imbue it in something. And I'd like to do more with that.
好，谢谢。
Thank you so much.
的问
Thank
题
you.
还有其他的观众吗？好，这边这位蓝衣服的，哎，工作人员递一下，好，对。
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed Blackbox when I was at the game center at NYU. And I'm also a puzzle game designer, and currently we now have a game design studio called Ice Studio here in Shanghai, and we are going to publish our first game that's called Alia, 亚利亚的倒影. That's about using mirrors to solving puzzles in the 3D space, and it's full of Chinese traditional elements. And I'm really excited to really see you here and see your new gigs. And I'm really curious about how are you gonna be sure that a castle is the castle? Because that's something that our designers always facing.
That's a really good question. Are there any philosophy students in the room?
I'm
Okay.
I minored in philosophy.
Okay. I don't know if we can really know. We just have to do the best we can. It's hard with things like that puzzle. I think there is a bit of realizing that it can always go further. So just knowing, I think for me, knowing that I feel I've taken it a step farther than most people are thinking of it is enough. And that's pushing things, and it's pushing people to think differently, and you're gonna produce something novel. Yeah, that's how I would think of it.
Do you have a sense of feeling or like an instinct when you say, aha, it's a castle that I'm pursuing?
When I'm designing a puzzle, that it's, you mean the look of it or the idea?
Anything.
Anything, yeah. I think there is an intuitive feeling, which is why it's nice to try to put things into words like this.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just have come up with kind of rules for myself. A lot of the times when I'm designing puzzles, it's like designing a really intuitive interface and then like making it unintuitive, which I think of as like putting a moat around a castle. So there is a way to like put a drawbridge down and cross it. And there's certain things that are problematic. I find like using icons. I try to avoid doing that because it can be misrepresented or it's like too direct. So just, I think things like that force me to have new constraints actually. And then having to think of ways to think outside of those constraints in that box helps produce things that feel right. But knowing what is right is hard. I think understanding that it is outside of that norm or outside of the expected tends to produce those results. But I'm gonna have to think about that more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
我们谢谢这位观众朋友。我们再有最后一个问题吧。好，哪位观众朋友还想提问？没有？哦，有，来。
Hey, fascinating talk. I'm curious just about doing all in on one thing for 10 years. Like, what did that take, and what was kind of the thought process to really decide, like, this is something worth dedicating a decade to, and how's it been?
Great question. It has been really wild and fun. I didn't expect things to go like this. I've told people before this was supposed to be a bit of a portfolio piece, because a lot of iOS job applications ask for an app on the App Store. It's been a wild ride. It's been, I think, really fulfilling for me as someone that's an extreme perfectionist to just get to like endlessly polish this rock, because I know all of the scratches on it, and I'm not happy with it. That takes me forward. It hasn't gotten really old. There's still so much. I have a list of 50 challenge ideas. The problem is not ideas, it's how to make them in a compelling way. And yeah, I don't know. I think I would love to do other stuff, but I feel like very attached to this. And also like these platforms, I feel like besides that when we were shipping CDs of games and stuff, we can keep updating things, like it's a living medium, so I feel the need to respect that a bit. And plus, a lot of my puzzles break all the time when APIs change. I have a crazy API surface, so that keeps me busy. But it's just been a really fun platform to continue to refine. I would like to find a point when it's not going to feel done, but when I can like send it off into the world a little more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's
Thank you.
so inspiring, and I look forward to the next decade of Black.